Ever. I propose to visit the island in early June. And so, Michael, I hope you'll be available to go down with me to, early June after the budget, to observe firsthand this incredible cycle of nature. The government subvention to the Bahamas National Trust is $1,125,000, which has not been affected by cuts to various other budgetary items. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the Nature Conservancy, which is another non-profit NGO that works with my ministry. This organization is keenly proactive in ecologically protecting sensitive lands and water for nature and people. We have worked tirelessly with the Nature Conservancy to fulfill the Bahamas' goals of the Caribbean Challenge. The ministry has partnered with the Nature Conservancy on the Global Environment Facility full-size project entitled Building a Sustainable National Marine Protected Area Network. This project is specifically designed to assist the Bahamas with achieving the goals of the Caribbean Challenge. Under the JEF full-size project, some funding will be provided to 1, establish a protected areas website, 2, create a Facebook page that disseminates information about protected areas, and more importantly, 3, update the Bahamas Ecological Gap Assessment, which identifies ecologically significant areas that should be included in the National Protected Areas System. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, the Waite Foundation and the Nature Conservancy conducted a rapid ecological assessment of some of the southern Bahama islands, including Crooked Island, Plana Keys, and Acklands. I look forward to receiving that research and being able to share it with colleagues. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to publicly thank Mr. Ted Waite and his foundation and the Nature Conservancy for their work in the Bahamas and contributing significantly to the development of research which will help us in making informed decisions. Mr. Speaker, this ministry is committed to the extension of the national parks and protected area system to include marine and coastal areas. Last month, I signed the Leaders' Declaration in the BVI that places the Bahamas government under an obligation to culturally and economically protect important marine resources in the country. However, Mr. Speaker, I want to be very, very clear. This will be done without the establishment of no-take zones, respecting the traditional fishing and recreational grounds for Bahamians.
What the party opposite has tended to do is to grab hold of some idea and dress it up with a catchy name. What is typically missing is the in-depth planning needed to develop programs which may prove truly effective for our people. Considering our budgetary constraints, the country cannot afford another program that risks failing because it opens before there is a necessary strategic planning done to help ensure the program's success. Mr. Speaker, this is not a jobs and neither is it a growth budget. Indeed, the budget provides little support to promote or to encourage the expansion of small and medium-sized businesses. It offers little to attract the increased levels of foreign direct investment, which has been key to our economic development over these many decades, and which suffered a precipitous decline during the last fiscal period. The government's thorough lack of vision can be seen in the area of tourism, the main driver of our economy. Instead of a strategic vision for tourism, this administration is in a grab bag mode, grabbing at any idea, whether it makes sense or not. Even this morning in today's paper, we see the former director of culture berating about the fact that we are now going after a Mardi Gras theme. That is in this morning's paper. I want to speak to that a little bit. The PRP seems to lack any coherent and consistent idea as to what our tourism product ought to be. Even though our central theme is, it's better in the Bahamas, this government seems to want to turn us into a sort of Las Vegas. The Minister of Tourism just last week said we will now become a gambling mecca? What did you say? A gaming destination. Okay? A gaming destination. Gaming is not a destination. We are advised of the government's intention to spend $1 million on developing some sort of Mardi Gras or carnival. It seems that the side opposite rarely has an original idea. Mardi Gras or carnival, Mr. Speaker, was developed in mostly Roman Catholic countries or jurisdictions such as New Orleans, Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago in the week before Lent. There is a history to these experiences which make them authentic to the cultures in which they were developed. Think of the brilliant rake and scrape performances of students in Cat Island and at schools such as the Gerald Cash Primary. It is this sort of indigenous experience to us and that talent that we should be nurturing instead of importing concepts with little connection to our historical experience. It is way past time to invest significant sums to dramatically enhance our tourism product in the area of heritage tourism, which they talk a lot about, such as the Adderley Plantation in Long Island, and the art and craft market in New Providence, and the indigenous straw, basket weaving of Red Bays, and the straw work of Long Island. Instead of importing silly ideas, we should be enhancing our product in ways that are authentic and that will have long-term economic impact for small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, not just in New Providence, but throughout the length and breadth of our Bahamas. As an example, one of my key interests is to work with the government and private sector partners to develop a visitor and education center at the world-famous Dean's Blue Hole in Long Island. Dean's Blue Hole was the subject of a segment on U.S. television program, 60 Minutes. The idea would be to create a small park with a visitor and an education center to teach Bahamians and visitors about blue holes. And I might add, we have other blue holes in Long Island and around the Bahamas, but I speak specifically to Long Island right now. As Dean's Blue Hole becomes more famous, it is necessary for us to create such a park in order to facilitate visitors and to protect the Blue Hole. Imagine how much money we can generate to the economy of Long Island with such blue holes. That is empowering people where they are. I would like to work with residents in Long Island to discuss the development of this idea, including how such a park might be not just maintained, but also managed. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Tourism said it would be a gaming destination. The correct wording I think he used at that time was a gaming nation.
The member yields. The chair recognizes the member for West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini.
Mr. Speaker, here is the issue that you always face. When a member, you tell a member what you said. I know what I was saying. I understood what I was saying. It's not what the media might have printed or one or two members of the media printed. What you ought to do is look at what I said, but to look at what was on television and all the rest. I know what I was saying. We're not a gaming nation. We know that. We have, and we will include in our offerings, gaming destination. Insofar as the Blue Hole of Long Island is concerned, it's so unfortunate that you're not aware of some of the things that's going on with the Blue Hole in Long Island, but I'll tell you when I speak.
Very well, thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Long Island.
It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, because I've spoken with the Minister for Tourism, the member for West End and Bimini, on numerous occasions about Long Island. So it is unfortunate. It is not that we do not have the lines of communication. So if he's chosen not to share it with me as the MP, then it's not my fault. So I speak to what I know, Mr. Speaker. I'm talking about tourism, Mr. Speaker. I also said to the Minister and the member for West End and Grand Bahama that when we talk about tourism in our islands, we should ensure that we are well equipped with the personnel on these islands. Right now, we have one individual in the tourism office in Long Island. And while she is doing a yeoman's task, she is a junior tourism officer. And I think if we're talking about developing tourism for all the islands, then we must ensure that we have the proper personnel and resources in place to do that. A concern expressed at the time in the 2012-13 budget debate continues to hold my attention, particularly as a representative of a family island constituency. I am concerned with the postponement and the cancellation of a number of significant infrastructural projects in Long Island and San Salvador and North Abaco. Waterworks in Long Island, public roads in San Salvador, and the resurfacing of the runway, which I understand they're doing now at Treasure Key. But Mr. Speaker, I wish, I said or, okay? I said or. I wish to speak at this point at some length of Long Islanders, because we are an industrious people. There is a long tradition, Mr. Speaker, of self-help in Long Island, accompanied by an independent spirit. During the regatta last week, you heard me talk at the beginning of how the Minister of Local Government and other officials were impressed with our refurbished and upgraded regatta site, now one of the best in the country. Private funds, Mr. Speaker, raised by the Long Islanders themselves, were used to upgrade that facility, and the labor was donated free of charge.
Under this government, this economy will rebound, and this budget sets out a fiscal plan to achieve this very important goal. Former Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham, in his 2009-2010 budget contribution, said of the economy, the recovery, when it does occur, is expected to be weaker and much slower than in previous rebounds. Mr. Ingraham, a man I must respect as a former Prime Minister of our country, received the same technical advice from the technocrats in the Ministry of Finance, very well-respected individuals who worked in global financial institutions, that our current leader and esteemed Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Centerville, is receiving. Advice that says, true to form, as the former Prime Minister said, this has proven to be a very tepid and weak recovery. It must also be said, Mr. Speaker, that as much as the technocrats would have advised the former Prime Minister, there's greater evidence today that this administration, led by this Prime Minister, is far more focused on outlining a plan of action geared towards growing this economy.
Yeah.
You see, it was very interesting what the member for Marathon had to say in his presentation in speaking to the lack of vision shown by the former administration. You see, I have no objection to investing monies in roads. I have no objection to investing monies in much-needed healthcare infrastructure. But at the end of the day, there has to be a plan of how the Bahamian people will maximally benefit from those investments. Because if you are building a country that is going to cause for jobs to be created. We'd like to believe that the people working in these hospitals are going to be Bahamians.
Yeah.
We'd like to know that the former administration would have articulated a plan for how to create employment opportunities for Bahamians to take on jobs that are right now predominantly being held by foreign nationals.
Yeah.
You talk about roads, but, Mr. Speaker, there is, at this point, a repeat or a mantra that members opposite repeat over and over and over again. Or at least you're driving on smooth roads. At least you have smooth roads you can drive on now. If that is the only thing that you can refer to as evidence of your success as an administration, something is drastically wrong. People now, Mr. Speaker, have difficulty putting gas in their car to drive on those roads. People are grappling with the banks having to threaten to foreclose on their homes.
Yeah.
They're not worrying about the roads. They want to know that you're going to grow an economy so that they can afford to keep their home, so they can afford to put gas in their car, so that they can afford to buy a car. Because there was no effort on the part of the previous administration to outline a vision that spoke to how it would improve the public transportation system to make it safer, so that you wouldn't feel compelled to buy a car as a result of a fear of your personal safety if you ride on a jitney bus. Vision. The most important evidence of this slow recovery, Mr. Speaker, is that the government, let me back up a little bit. Let me say it this way. The most important evidence of this government's commitment to correcting our fiscal trajectory is that we are making clear steps to decrease the disparity between government spending and government revenue.
Yes.
That's a fact. I'm no financial expert, but if I could at least try to speak in simple terms in a way that I, as a layman, can understand, and the man and woman out there can understand, we are not increasing our debt far more than our country is generating revenue.
Yeah.
We're trying to decrease the gap between the increase in debt and the amount of revenue that we're collecting. So rather than this happening, we have a closure of that gap. That is what this budget demonstrates.
Yes. I'm not trying to spend more than we earn.
So yes, even though we have a greater recurrent expenditure in this budget, the number, when you take it as a percentage or an amount of the recurrent revenue, it is more in favor of fiscal responsibility and an improvement of your fiscal health, meaning that your account is starting to look your bank account is starting to look a whole lot more healthy.
Yeah.
That is what this Minister of Finance and his team of technocrats at the Ministry of Finance and his cabinet have been forced to do. And rather than being reckless and playing politics and thinking about what is in the best interest of the PLP, they've instead adhered or listened to the advice given, not just by the local experts, but the international experts, who have said that you must try to get your financial ship back in order.
Yeah.
And think about future generations, and not just the here and the now. So, yeah, don't just think about the next election. Don't just create all these temporary jobs as though you genuinely care, but you do it in the last year or the year or the eve of an election and have people believe that you had their interests at heart all along. We can't be short-sighted. So instead of increasing spending as a percentage of revenue, with this budget we are decreasing spending as a percentage of revenue. This is evidence that we have brought a budget to this place that demonstrates an increase in fiscal discipline, to put the brakes on the speed at which we have been increasing our national debt. As the Right Honorable Member for Centerville noted, a consequence of the tremendous borrowing of the previous administration that included debts left for this administration to have to pay for has been that almost 1 out of every $4 spent by government is going towards the payment of our debts.
Yep.
While we understand that governments are oftentimes in the business of borrowing without a growing economy to create sources of revenue to pay for the government's financial obligations.
Some of what transpired the last time members met in the House of Assembly. We have some technical adjustments we need to make, but let me remind you as well that we are streaming live at livestream.com/ZNS Bahamas, also on our website, znsbahamas.com, and you can visit us on Facebook as well. Again, the member for Kalani, Dr. Hubert Minnis, expected to begin his presentation this morning. Let's join them now as they prepare to begin this morning's session.
My brother was younger, so I had the key. So he had to find me to get the key. So he came to the school where H.O. Nash was principal, and I sat right by the window. And while I was paying attention to my lesson, I felt his arm around me. The man lifted me out of my chair and through the window and hugged me. And all I could say was, "Daddy, you got to talk to Mr. Nash. You got to speak to Mr. Nash." But he was so glad to see me. Give your children and your grandchildren a hug. Let them know that you love them. The country needs fathers who will love their children. The lesson this morning comes from Jesus. A certain ruler asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "Why do you call me good?" Jesus answered. "No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother. All these I have kept since I was a boy," he said. When Jesus heard this, he said to him, "You still lack one thing. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When he heard this, he became very sad, because he was a man of great wealth. Jesus looked at him and said, "How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. Indeed, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Those who heard this asked, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus replied, "What is impossible with men is possible with God." Here ends the lesson from St. Luke. That is the New International Version. Let us pray. Gracious God and our Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the weekend that has just passed. Now we can resume the business of this country in this honorable chamber. We ask your blessing on today's agenda and on those who will speak to the matter at hand. Bless our speaker as he directs the affairs, and grant that there will be cooperation, there will be patience, there will be understanding and good judgment. We thank you for loving us, and now we ask on this nation a special blessing on fathers and sons as well as mothers and daughters. And Lord, as we head for this 40th anniversary, may it help us all to be a better people, to make this country the best little place on God's great earth. Forgive us our sins and give us grace sufficient for this day, we pray, in the name of him who taught us to pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. With God, all things are possible.
Good morning, honorable members. Welcome to a continuation of sitting of this honorable House, and happy belated Father's Day to all of the men who may not even be fathers, but were born destined for fatherhood. We congratulate them nonetheless. When we suspended at our last sitting, today is Monday, the 17th of June, in the year of our Lord 2013, we were debating the appropriations, a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing 1st of July 2013 and ending the 30th of June 2014. This appropriations bill will serve as the bill in a series of bills commonly referred to as the budget debate, and we are presently on second reading and committal. But before we continue, just wanted to pause for a moment and congratulate once again Sunland Baptist Academy High School on their graduation festivities that was held on Thursday evening past, and in particular the CEO, Bishop Godfrey Williams, and his wife, Iris Williams, Principal King, and her wonderful team of dedicated professionals. It was a very impressive graduation ceremony where 100% of the class met the requirements for graduation. 75% were accepted into college and universities here and abroad. They deserve our commendation for a job well done. So congratulations once again to Sunland Baptist Academy. Secondly, I'd like to extend apologies on behalf of the member for Marco City, who apologizes for his absence due to pressing business matters and recently a very interesting and congratulatory family matter that causes him to leave the country at this time. He sends his regards. Now to the matter at hand. As many. The member yields. The chair recognizes honorable member for Bain and Grand Star.
I received a communication from the member for Port Charlotte indicating that he's unwell today and may not be able to attend Parliament. I just thought I would inform you, sir.
Very well. Thank you, honorable member. As many. The chair recognizes honorable member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank all those Bahamians and friends who had called, sent me texts, email messages, called my home to see how I was doing and wished me the best and wished me well and hoped that I would have gotten well soon to be here to present this budget. Mr. Speaker, I had a mild, what I would consider, headache. As a result, I did not think that I would have been in the best condition nor the best health to stand up here for 2 hours and debate and argue with that side for 2 hours in addition to fighting a headache. But, Mr. Speaker, I am now well. I am very well. And I will utilize my time as appropriate as possible. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say this nation is divided. this nation is being divided. And Mr. Speaker, as we stand here today, this nation needs healing. And Speaker, you understand what I talk about healing. You're a medical personnel. I am a medical personnel. And we both were put here, Mr. Speaker, for a purpose. And our purpose is to heal this nation. Mr. Speaker, when we left office, when the FNM left office, we were faced with one of the worst recessions this country has seen. But we did our best, and I thought we were outstanding. But when we left, Mr. Speaker, we left the Bahamas and the economy of the Bahamas in a wheelchair, yet mobile and breathing. Some countries throughout the world would have filed for bankruptcy. Some counties would have filed for bankruptcy. But we, the FNM government, was able to leave the Bahamas within a wheelchair. But within 1 year of the PLP coming to government, the Bahamas was immediately bedridden. We were bedridden, the Bahamas and the economy. And now, Mr. Speaker, they come to us today with a budget. And what this budget would do, Mr. Speaker, is now remove the Bahamas from bed. We're now being placed on respirators. We are now being placed on respirators, Mr. Speaker, and that is why it's so essential. It's so essential for you and I to be here to assist in healing this nation. Mr. Speaker, during the last budget, they repeatedly called us that we functioned and acted like drunken sailors. We heard that word thrown back and forth at us repeatedly. But if you look around, just look around New Providence, Grand Bahama, and the Family Islands, you would see what these so-called drunken sailors did. But, Mr. Speaker, within a short period of time of the PLP coming to office, they had borrowed in excess of $1 billion. And if you look around, what do you see? What can you see? What have they done with that $1 billion, in excess of $1 billion? So, Mr. Speaker, one has to ask the question whether they are family to the Joneses. It must be some relative to the Joneses to function like that, Mr. Speaker. Nothing to show. Absolutely nothing to show. Other than what they've done with this excess $1 million, the only thing they've done was dismissed FNMs and hired PLP, hired pensioners, their cronies, and hired retirees. $1 million worth. $1 billion worth. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my second contribution to the budget debate as leader of opposition. I thank the good people of Kalani, whom I have the great honor of representing in this honorable House, for the trust they have reposed in me, and I thank the thousands of supporters who supported me and my party around this great Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank my parliamentary colleagues for the excellent presentation they have made during the budget exercise. Notwithstanding the numerous interruptions by members opposite, who at times appeared to be on a campaign to silence the opposition. But this opposition would not be silenced, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, it was often difficult, if not impossible, for members of the public to follow the opposition members' contributions. Because of the tag team interruptions by government members on made-up points of orders manufactured for the sole purpose of permitting additional opportunities for lengthy presentations from the government side. But we will not be silent, Mr. Speaker, nor will we be interrupted. We came here as opposition representing the Bahamian people, and we will have our say. Mr. Speaker, members of Her Majesty's loyal opposition sat through the budget presentation by the Minister of Finance. The communication contained much with which we did not agree. Much with which we did not agree. But we did not interrupt. We sat silent and listened. We did not interrupt. We listened also to the contributions of ministers whose contributions contained many things with which we did not agree with. But in spite of that, we did not interrupt. We held our interruptions, Mr. Speaker, to a minimum. We held our interruptions and listened. Mr. Speaker, it is said of democracies that the majority will have its way, but the minority must have its say. And while we are here, Mr. Speaker, this minority opposition will have its say. This minority, Mr. Speaker, intends to have its say in this Parliament. We will not be silent. Mr. Speaker, in reviewing the budget statement, I am reminded of William Shakespeare's play, Much Ado About Nothing. During the general election campaign, members opposite made outlandish and irresponsible promises. In opposition, they ignored the realities of the global economy and promised the Bahamian people that they could, within 100 days, deliver all manners of things. Both the current budget and the budget we are dealing with make it patently clear that this government is making little or no progress in delivering these solutions. I commend this budget for its high-sounding rhetoric, its characteristically wonderful promises, and its alleged commitment to the principles of fiscal responsibility. But I find devastating, Mr. Speaker, I find devastating the enormous gap between what it says and the actual strategy it is embarking upon. This budget, Mr. Speaker, this budget contains no plan to fight crime, to grow our economy, to create sustainable jobs, to reduce the rate of growth of government debt, to train and prepare our people to compete in the global economy, or to improve the quality and delivery of public services to the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the country needs focused leadership, steady and competent hands. This is not what this government is providing. The hands on the wheel of government are not steadfast. In fact, there are too many hands trying to steer the ship of state. I asked the Prime Minister knock those additional hands aside. He must grab the wheel and drive that vessel himself. He cannot have the additional 17, 18 hands trying to grab that wheel. Take control, Prime Minister. This is your government. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, is meandering while taking on water and sailing in the heavy seas of crime, joblessness, especially among the young, poor garbage collection,
Members,
bloated public finances, increased government borrowing, and erratic, inflammatory, and reactionary immigration policies, and a lack of focus. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance sought to explain his government's failure in the near-term implementation of the vital portions of its agenda, such as job creation, attacking crime, and strengthening the social safety net by reference to the fiscal situation he inherited. He referenced the fiscal situation it inherited. He said not a word about how much worse his government has made that fiscal situation. Not a word, Mr. Speaker, in such a short period of time. In other words, its dismal performance in the fitful pursuit of its agenda is someone else's fault. At the end of its 5-year term, I expect this government will still be blaming its failures on the former government with no sense of shame. They have absolutely no shame, Mr. Speaker. All bad, they try to blame on us, or what they perceive as bad. But all of our success, they try to take merit for. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance virtually began his budget communication with the following statement, I quote, "My government is acting decisively to improve the health of the public finances and to pull us out of the debilitating public debt spiral that we inherited upon coming to office," end quote. But then he shamelessly proposed the borrowing of $521 million in addition to the $629 million this government has already borrowed. This provides, Mr. Speaker, the largest increase in debt in the entire history of this country in any 2-year period. Mr. Speaker, the borrowing alone that this government has subjected us to, that young baby that was delivered at the Princess Margaret Hospital half hour ago, they have already forced a $4,000 debt on that baby who just came into this country 30 minutes ago. That's what their borrowing has done. Mr. Speaker, I believe we must acknowledge that beginning in 2008, the Bahamas, and indeed the world, was confronted with the worst economic crisis in 80 years. Most of the world, including the Bahamas, is still experiencing the fallout from that crisis. That crisis, Mr. Speaker, demanded some extraordinary measures to combat some of its effects. Extraordinary measures. We took those measures. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we took those measures to ensure that the Bahamas stayed afloat. The record shows that between 2007 and 2012, the Bahamas navigated the turmoil of the global economic storms better than any island nation in the world. Any island nation in the world. In fact, the Bahamas outperformed many developed societies, but yet they say we mismanaged. Mr. Speaker, in office, the FNM followed a clear and well-coordinated plan to navigate the Bahamas' economy safely through the turbulent times. However, this was not to be. This was not to be. Like many incumbent governments around the world, whose fate it was to deal with the Great Recession, the FNM lost its re-election bid. As frightened, angry, and frustrated electorates took their anger at the economic crisis out on the government of the day. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the world experience has been that most governments voted out of office in whiplash reaction to economic hard times have been replaced with calamitous successes. Calamitous successes, as we now see here in our Bahama land. Mr. Speaker, although the present government has been far from the effectual government it promised to be, some good things have been accomplished in our country over the past 13 months. And a number of additional good things are nearing completion even as we speak. The FNM is pleased and proud to have had a hand in the planning, developing, and starting up a number of these initiatives. And these initiatives include, Mr. Speaker, the beach soccer pitch, which FIFA just recently utilized, the seaside parks at Montague, the fish and conch vendor facility at Montague Beach, including first world standard public restroom facilities. And I call on the government today, to complete the construction of the restroom facilities, which are already in high demand by Bahamians and international visitors to our facilities, visitors who are taken there by taxi and tour operators. The National Stadium. The National Stadium. Dredging of the Nassau Harbor, Mr. Speaker. And this project has paid for itself within 3 years of completion. The New Providence Road Infrastructure Program, including upgrades of water and electricity infrastructure in the inner city and outlying suburbs to the south. The airport gateway project, whose water and sewage components has caused improved quantity and quality of potable water to residents of New Providence, from Cable Beach in the west, along Robinson Road and Prince Charles Drive, to residents in eastern end of our islands in Elizabeth Estates, Yamacraw, Nassau East, Fox Hill, and so on, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment benefits. The unemployment benefit scheme assists to improve the quality of life and giving individuals respect and dignity to assist in paying their light, their mortgages, their water, their gas, their car, etc. returning quality to individuals, Mr. Speaker. The prescription drug plan, which allowed individuals to access their medication through the private sector rather than having to wait in lines continuously. Expanded education plant, expanded healthcare infrastructure, community hospitals in Abaco and Exuma, massive public infrastructure throughout the country, new government administration complexes in Abaco and Grand Bahama, the three-phase redevelopment of a self-financed LPIA. Phase 1, Mr. Speaker, completed in 2011, with Phase 2 being ready for official opening within months of the last general election. Transformation of ownership of shipping industry, causing the creation of joint public-private company with wide Bahamian ownership. Transfer of the cargo port from Bay Street, relieving the traffic to Arawak Key, Mr. Speaker, and 24/7 e-government services. The critical care block at the Princess Margaret Hospital, which the Minister of Health acknowledged in his contribution, and I quote, will be the model of the region. The minister admit that the critical care block that we had commenced, and they will cut ribbon only. Cut ribbon. I hope they invite me. I hope they invite me. At least. But if they don't invite me, if I get ill, at least I'll have nice facilities. And with such facilities, I can lay there in Princess Margaret Hospital, provided the minister follow through with our plan. I can lay there in Princess Margaret Hospital and be examined and assessed by a doctor at Johns Hopkins, a doctor in Minnesota, a doctor in Russia, whomever I choose. That's the facility we put there. That's the facility we put there. Of course, I will be in Nassau. But, Mr. Speaker, I repeat, the minister acknowledged, that it will be the model of the region. That's what this government is about. That's what the FNM was about. We were about creating the Bahamas, which would be a model for the region, compete with other first world nations, so that we would be the hub for the Caribbean. We would be the hub, just like New York, Geneva are the hub for different regions. We were creating a Bahamas to be the hub for the Caribbean, Mr. Speaker. The modernization of the Bahamas customs legislation, administrative and technological regime. Mr. Speaker, the present government is reaping, they are reaping the harvest of political capital expended by the FNM labor. But while reaping the harvest of our labor, they are serving the people the bitter fruit of division, mismanagement, and incoherent babble, complete babble. Mr. Speaker, in our last term in office, we made substantial long-term investments to secure the future of this Bahamas. The products of our investment on behalf of the Bahamian people are self-evident, some of which I've mentioned. It's self-evident. I watched the ministers drive sitting in their back seat, some sitting in the front seat, and they drive along in the car. They drive like big shots. No bumps anymore. They're driving in comfort. Leaving their homes 5-10 minutes before a meeting in the east, and you see them I mean, Mr. Speaker, sometime I'm cruising, moving from east to west, and they're pulling me over. They're pulling me over with their outriders. They're enjoying this. They're enjoying these roads so well. They're pulling. I mean, when they look and see that's the opposition leader, my God, they toot even more. Get on the side. But no, I abide. We have some of the most modern infrastructure in our region. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, among small developing states in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, in contrast to the successful policies that the FNM left in place, what has the current administration offered us? Well, allow me to inform you. What have they offered us? Allow me to inform you. They have offered us a mortgage relief program, which they've promised. And I've given that an F.
Nobody qualified.
Dead on arrival, Mr. Speaker.
Nobody qualified.
Dead on arrival. They've offered us swift justice. Another F. Not working. In fact, we, the FNM, we increased the criminal Supreme Courts from 2 to 5. The member for South Eleuthera, in his presentation the other day, he says that only 85 criminal cases were completed last year. And he thinks that it should have been 200. Where in the world is swift justice? If that is swift, my God, I wonder what happened to the Pony Express. Just think of what is happening in the magistrate courts, Mr. Speaker. If we are moving our system along as if we are in the Pony Express era, it would have effect not only on the criminal side, but eventually on the commercial side, thus encouraging that commerce to leave our country and have some damning effect on our livelihood, Mr. Speaker. It's essential that the court system be fixed. What else have they offered us, Mr. Speaker? Solutions to crime. Again, F. Still out of control in spite of promising the solution. They offered homeowners bill. F. Complete disaster in the making. They offered us again, Mr. Speaker, pension bill. F. Withdrawn and placed in committee stage. They promised 10,000 jobs. 10,000 jobs. Again, F. Still waiting. And 10,000 more young persons have completed school this year and added to the list of job seekers. Double investment in education. Another of their offers. F again, Mr. Speaker. The education budget was cut. Mr. Speaker, it's amazing. As I go through my list and see the amount of F, this PLP government is even lagging behind the national grade average of the Bahamas. You should be ashamed. You should be ashamed. Those students are doing well compared with your performance. The nation is doing well. You are F. There is simply no comparison, Mr. Speaker, between the good stewardship provided by the FNM government and the visionless and focusless leadership offered by this government. No comparison. Absolutely no comparison. Now, Mr. Speaker, we go to a very, very important topic. Crime. We go to crime. As I've said, this budget is deficient in addressing a myriad of problems confronting our country. Primary among its deficits is the paucity of provisions made to combat one of, if not the greatest plague in our society today: crime. The level of crime in our country, and very particularly in our capital city, is a threat to the continued economic life and social well-being of our nation today. By now, Mr. Speaker, all Bahamians realize that crime is not an F&M issue, as was so vigorously claimed by the members opposite during the last general election campaign, when they strategically displayed posters at traffic roundabouts attributing the state of crime and criminality impacting our communities at that time on the shortcomings of the F&M. But as an old adage say, Mr. Speaker, when you dig one grave, dig two, and dig yours deeper, because yours will be covered with slab, concrete, not dust. Let's fast forward 1 year, Mr. Speaker. Let's fast forward 1 year. Now, on their watch, members opposite claim that crime is no longer a political issue. It's now a national issue. But previously, it was a political issue. Now they're in control. It's a national issue. Except they make this claim notwithstanding that the Minister of State in the Ministry of National Security maintains that he has no problem with declaring crime to be political, because crime is the result of decisions made by policymakers. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker? I could not believe my eyes as I was reading that. And he had no problem with the posters that were placed around New Providence. I could not believe it. I wonder if I was in Alice in Wonderland reading that. Mr. Speaker, on May 26, 2011, the day on which the budget communication was delivered, the then leader of the opposition and now Prime Minister held a press conference in which he recounted that there had been 48 murders for the year as of that day. He claimed that some 368 murders had been committed in our country in 48 months since the FNM had been elected to government 4 years earlier on May 2nd, 2007. 2007. Now listen. Listen, Mr. Speaker. I want all Bahamas to hear this. He also lamented that a robbery had been committed days earlier in broad daylight in the center of our capital city. 8 months later, the member for Cat Island, San Salvador, and Rum Key, today, now the Deputy Prime Minister, told members of the media that crime might be a complex issue, but a government with the right priorities and the right commitment could solve the crime problem. What are your priorities? Wake up, man. Crime is a priority.
Member,
Was their priority?
Continue to address.
Were their priorities firing FNMs and hiring PLPs? Was their priorities hiring pensioners and retirees? Mr. Speaker, the whole Bahamas knows that crime should be a priority. Maybe, as he speaks, he would tell me what is the priority. He maintained, Mr. Speaker, that the PLP were the only party with the experience and the know-how to do the job. That's what the Deputy Prime Minister said. That's what I say. That's not my word. Yeah. He held out as examples of what a PLP government would do to beat crime, like the introduction of Urban Renewal 2.0, the return of school policing, the introduction of saturation patrols in high crime areas, the restoration of witness protection, and a new operation, Cease Fire, which would immediately address the cycle of revenge killing, terrorizing citizens. The new operation, Cease Fire. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that he said the cease very, very soft. Because the only thing the criminals out there heard was fire, fire, fire one, fire two, because that's all we're having. Every day somebody is firing gunshots here, left, right, and center. But stress the word cease. They're not hearing cease. Your program is called ceasefire, not fire. That's all the criminals are hearing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education and Member of Parliament for Marathon, campaigning for election, promised that the PLP would create a special unit to deal with death penalty cases, ensuring more effective crime fighting. Well, Mr. Speaker, here we are. 13 months following the election of the PLP on the 7th of May 2012, discussing this government's second budget meant to marshal the resources of our country to meet its most critical need. Let us review what the PLP have accomplished fighting crime since that day. Let us review. Now you're going to get a lesson, so listen carefully. We're going to review. On the 7th of May 2012, the murder count stood at 45. 18 days later, the murder count had risen by 11 to 56. On the 29th of May 2013, the day on which this year's budget communication was delivered this year, the murder count stood at 49 as compared to 48 on the same day of 2011. Not only, Mr. Speaker, have there been robberies on their watch, but in the center, remember he lamented about one case that occurred, but in the center of our capital, but within the space of less than a month, within the space of less than a month, a visitor was killed at the foot of Paradise Island Bridge. But he lamented about one case. A visitor was killed at the foot of Paradise Island Bridge. 2 visitors were robbed just outside of a downtown nightclub, Senior Frog.
What about the Paradise Island?
An American diplomat was accosted and robbed on her way to Sunday worship at the Roman Catholic Cathedral. My cathedral, Catholic, my cathedral, in the heart of the city of Nassau, in the middle of the morning. And 2 other visitors were robbed not far from the cathedral on the following morning.
Paradise Island by the hotel.
I forgot the Paradise Island. Visitors were robbed Paradise Island, the hotel.
Outside the Royal Tower.
As a result of the attack on the U.S. diplomat, the U.S. visa section of the U.S. Consulate General was closed to Bahamians for a full day. An unprecedented event in our 40 years of independence, except when closure was dictated by a hurricane or seriously inclement weather or some disaster. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
Members.
Speaker, make sure I don't lose any time with them trying to heckle. The Bahamas.
Not going to be any heckling. You continue to speak.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was concerned about one day time robbery in the city of Nassau in 2011. What does he say now? What does he say now? It's his budget communication. In his budget communication, he told us that crime generally is trending downward. Where does he live? Where does he live? Of course, he lives in his ivory tower. He's guarded by police. He has outriders coming out. He's protected by police. He's not cognizant of what's happening. He cannot be cognizant of what's happening, Mr. Speaker.
Members.
Where does he live? Yes, I catch Jitney. I caught Jitney the other day.
Member for Kalani, continue to stay focused and address the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Where were the promised saturation patrols? Ceasefire. But I forgot. It's not ceasefire, it's more fire. More fire. An urban renewal 2.0. The Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, as leader of the opposition, also claimed to be concerned at the number of murders committed over a 4-year period under the FNM government. Over a 4-year period. 368. 368. But we were also concerned. We were likewise concerned. And we were implementing important programs to promote full societal involvement in combating the scourge of crime, like beefing up law enforcement agencies with additional manpower and equipment, expanding the number of magistrates, judges, and courts, and strengthening our anti-crime legislation which some members of government claimed were too harsh because they meted out tough sentences on criminals. Mr. Speaker, I want to say here, and so the Bahamas can hear me, we must enforce the laws that are there. If the laws say hang, hang. Don't tell me that it's impossible. Man, Mr. Speaker, if man can travel to the moon,
Members,
if man can walk on the moon, you trying to tell me it's impossible? It's impossible? When Kennedy spoke about man walking on the moon, they said then it was impossible. Make it happen. Make it happen. And Mr. Speaker, we launched Volunteer Bahamas to garner the widest possible community involvement in promoting positive behaviors and countering destructive, antisocial, and criminal behavior. This program appears to have been abandoned by this government, who I presume fear acknowledging that anything good can emanate from anywhere except from themselves. Anything can only come from themselves if it's good. If it's bad, it's someone else's. The Prime Minister and his party had control of the government for exactly 1 year and 6 weeks now. And with the murder count on, what is the murder count on their watch? 121. That's right, 121. That's 66 murders between May 8th and December 31st, 2012. And 55 murders between the 1st of January and the 16th of June 2013. And I am not counting what they now call legal homicide. On the FNM's watch, listen carefully, on the FNM's watch, 368 murders in 48 months. On the PLP watch, 121 murders in 13 months. Do the maths. Do the maths.
Put it on a minute. Put it on.
Is the Prime Minister concerned now? Is he concerned now? Will he not hold an elaborate press conference now? No bashing the government now. Oh, before I forget, now he says we're going to ask the U.S. for assistance to help us to stop killing ourselves and sometimes U.S. citizens. This from a government led by a party that campaigned on an election platform which claimed that they were the only party with the experience and the know-how to tackle crime. They did?
No.
I say no.
No, you can't do that.
No.
Tourism is too important.
We won't. As we have said many times before, we are different, distinctly different from them. We put country first. We put country first.
Can't kill
Mr.
tourism.
Speaker, given all that talk about programs they would implement to fight crime if elected, I am compelled to ask, where exactly are the saturation patrols to combat crime? Surely it is not in our capital city, where it now seems that neither Bahamians nor tourists are safe from assault. And given the serious state of crime in the country, will the Prime Minister give an accounting for why one of the earliest actions taken by his government on the crime front was to change the method of recording and reporting serious crime? Will the Prime Minister tell us what the impact of the new and expanded Urban Renewal 2.0 program has been on the incidence of criminality in our communities, such as West Street. I am told that many police officers assigned urban renewal as a I am told that many police officers see assignment to urban renewal as a cushy job for the politically connected.
No,
Mr. Speaker,
no.
we in the FNM believe that not until we get back to the real community policing that the police know and understand, and which was introduced under the FNM during the second term in office, will we begin to experience real and measurable improvement in our crime situation. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, the interruption of real community policing by the policies of members opposite their second brand of urban renewal between 2002 and 2007, and again now, is a disruption that is once again having lethal consequences. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I ask, is Operation Ceasefire or More Fire in place? And what does the government believe has been its impact? Are we to believe that there would have been more gang and revenge killings had this PLP concoction not being introduced? Child, please. Child, please. Mr. Speaker, I want to inquire about the status of several anti-crime initiatives put in place by the last FNM government. One, where, for example, are the 2 police compact mobile command centers that were purchased in 2011? These were to be used as a crime-fighting and intelligence-gathering tools. One was used at the National Stadium as a staging station for the police. These were meant to be deployed at hot spots in our communities as a means of enhancing police presence when and where needed. 2, with regard to video conferencing at the courts, I have noted that the Attorney General now touts the introduction of this technological advance, expediting cases and saving costs as if it were a product of this PLP government. Of course, that is not the case. That is not true. Video conferencing was introduced by the FNM in March 2012. In fact, we built a facility near Her Majesty's Prison at Fox Hill to also allow inmates to make bail applications via video conferencing rather than requiring them to be brought downtown to court.
Speeding through the streets.
And we created a legal and administrative framework to make the system effective, including conveying the land on which the facility is housed from the prison and creating a new entrance on Yamacraw Hill Road. 3, some officers continue to complain about the retired officers who are being brought in at senior levels, some of whom reportedly sit idle in police station but create a glass ceiling preventing gazetted and non-gazetted officers from moving up the chain of command on the police force. Will the government commit to correcting this injustice, which is negatively impacting the morale of police officers, even as they put their lives on line to protect us on a daily basis? Our police officers, Mr. Speaker, leave their homes, leave their families unprotected to come out to work the streets to protect us. Should we not protect them? That's our duty. I have it on good authority that some of these retirees hardly worked during their last years as active career officers. Now, surely, they don't have necessary energy today that they didn't have yesterday. Many Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, believe the propaganda, deceptive slogans, spiteful speeches, and empty promises spewed by members opposite during the last general election. To say that many are suffering from buyer's remorse is not an understatement. Mr. Speaker, having spied the FNM anti-crime agenda, including a commitment to engage an additional 250 officers set out in our manifesto 2012. We, having over the preceding 5 years, engaged some 434 policemen to walk the beat. The Prime Minister advised in his budget communication that his government is hiring an additional 450 recruits over a 2-year budget period, 2012-13, 2013-14. He claims in his budget communication to have provided $8 million to permit these hirings. The reality is that this budget provides less money for the police than was expended by the last FNM government in 2011-2012 budget, $128.2 million versus $127.1. Still, Mr. Speaker, we are supposed to accept and believe that there is a commitment by this government to ensuring that the Royal Bahamas Police Force is properly manned and adequately equipped with up to 450 new recruits to lead the charge against crime. I say, please. Mr. Speaker, there is a recurring theme in this government's crime fight. The PLP are piggybacking on what the FNM put in place. But that's fine. That's fine, no problem. In fact, that's what should happen. Successive governments building on what their predecessors did. That's democracy. That's the moral. But at the very least, acknowledge it, man. Give us some credit. Don't take everything. Give us credit.
Hang up, man.
Mr. Speaker, this government's habit of taking credit for other people's initiative is repeated in their plans by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The visit planned by the FNM Minister of Foreign Affairs to meet with counterpart agencies of the government of the Dominican Republic after the general election to discuss improved cooperation to prevent poaching in Bahamian waters by Dominican fishing fleets was undertaken by the new PLP Minister of Foreign Affairs. Listening to his report on the initiative, one could be excused for believing that this is a new initiative of the incoming government. Just a bit of credit, man. No. Mr. Speaker, please, I will finish. I got 2 hours, man.
The time is held. You did ask the member a question. Member Yield. The chair recognizes the member for Fox Hill.
I just want to say for the record that when I gave the statement in the House, I did say that it was something that was decided by the Free National Movement government in March of 2012. I did say that.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for Kalani, you may continue. The clock was at 59.
Mr. Speaker, just an admission that the world was not created, on day one of this PLP's government's term in office. That's all we ask, acknowledgement.
Members.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is that it is almost a tradition of the governing party to neglect the needs of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. In 1992, we found Royal Bahamas Defense Force vessels docked at Coral Harbor without funding for petrol for the few ships that were seaworthy. We fixed that. We fixed that. And did a lot more. We were voted out of office in 2002, but when we returned in 2007, it was to the reality that not a single vessel had been bought by our successors in government. They had bought an aircraft, but a King Air unsuited for patrol. The last F&M government increased the fleet by 10 crafts and purchased 2 aircrafts paid for out of the confiscated asset fund created by the F&M government while in office. Then we set out about beginning the implementation of a phased replacement and expansion of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force fleet. At the time of the last general election, the bids had been received and Cabinet had approved the bid for the construction of 11 new craft for the force. Surely the upgrade of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force fleet ought to be an apolitical issue, not to be interrupted or delayed because of political agendas. Yet the visit set by the last F&M government for the 18th of May 2012 to the Damen plant in the Netherlands and involving representatives from the Ministry of National Security, the Defense Force, the Ministry of Finance, and the Office of the Attorney General was cancelled by the incoming PLP government. Then 1 year later, the matter is brought up and the trip set as if the entire exercise was a new plan developed by this government. Mr. Speaker, there were other Defense Force matters left in train by the last F&M government that are of continued value to the country. And so I ask, what is the status of the new Defense Force based in Ragged Island? Have plans to acquire 2 additional aircraft for air wing being abandoned? Will the dredge of the Coral Harbor and Inagua harbors be undertaken? Mr. Speaker, our economy is driven by foreign direct investment. Without foreign direct investment, our economy cannot grow. Looking through his rose-colored glasses, the Prime Minister talks a good game about prospects for increased foreign investments. But the fact of the matter is that foreign investments have been halved from an average of $965 million per year in 2010 and 2011 to $595 million in 2012. I hasten to say, Mr. Speaker, in response to the Minister of State in the office of the Prime Minister, the member for Pinewood, that while the FDI statistics include proceeds of privatization of BTC, no such proceeds are recorded among foreign direct investment statistics for the previous 6 years. Would he have us believe that BTC's privatization also impacted the level of foreign direct investment in 2005, 2006, 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11? According to the government's own statistics provided in this budget, the last time the foreign direct investment in our economy was at this 2012 low was in 2004, years before the economic crisis which began in 2008. We are told, Mr. Speaker, that every 1 million of foreign direct investment produces some 4 jobs in our economy. That means that as many as 3,000 850 jobs, which would have been created if the level of FDI inflows during the last year of the F&M government had been maintained, did not materialize. Mr. Speaker, the investment in developing a tourist amenity at Balmoral Island is a good example of this theory. The Crown land was leased to Bahamians by the government. The Bahamians negotiated a deal with foreign visitors to develop a tourist facility on the leased land. Those international investors, approved by the F&M prior to the general election, have spent some $6 million in the development of the facility to date. They advise that they will soon employ 200 persons. Some 100 Bahamians were engaged in the construction and preparation of the facility. I think it appropriate to note, Mr. Speaker, that the developers of Balmoral facility all advise that there will not be any shops on Balmoral, creating business competition for Bay Street stores. There will, however, be a place for the sale of locally made Bahamian craft. Mr. Speaker, I have described this budget as a vacuum. The dictionary describes a vacuum as a space that is empty of matter. The word stems from the Latin adjective vacuus, which means vacant or void. And vacant and void is exactly what this budget is about. This is a visionless budget. Throughout its communication, the finance minister refers, and I quote, to our strategy for enhancing domestic growth and employment prospects and the details of our fiscal action plan to restore the sustainability of our public finances, end quote. But he provided no details in any of his lengthy communications. Further, Mr. Speaker, after listening to successive ministers and MPs from the side opposite, I am even more convinced that this budget is V cube, vacant, visionless, and void, V cube. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own budget, his own budget numbers indicate that economic growth has stalled. Joblessness is growing, and government revenue is down. Public services, such as garbage collection, outpatient services at hospitals and at community health clinics, have not been so deficient in years. The Minister of Finance conceded that 2 months ago he projected that he would collect $70 million more in revenue than he is now projecting will be collected by the end of this fiscal period, 30th of June 2013. Mr. Speaker, vehicle dealerships report in the media that sales of new motor vehicles are down by 26%, and sales commercial vehicles are down by 35% for the first quarter of this year. Vehicle sales, of course, is a high tax and hence high revenue generating sector. Why is the government taking the Bahamas away from a green environment with its tax levy on cars? The F&M, Mr. Speaker, sought to ensure that cleaner, more efficient cars were imported into the Bahamas by attaching a lower import duty on fuel-efficient, green energy vehicles and by charging higher customs duty on larger, high-energy burning engines. This budget has changed the duty rate to reflect the dollar value of the vehicle. Several things will result, Mr. Speaker. Several things will result. All of them bad. Increased opportunity for invoice cheating. Older, less efficient cars will be imported. And the poor should be protected. The poor should be protected. I'm a product of poverty. I'm a descendant of poverty. So at least put a ceiling on the age limit of cars. Increase pollution and more car theft. Mr. Speaker, I just want to give an example. More car theft. Just before Labor Day,
He said he ain't never been there.
a young lady had her Honda Civic stolen. One day later, the car was found by the police,
Always on shoes.
taken to police compound. The only thing missing at that time was the tape deck. Taken to police compound to do the necessary investigation. The car was subsequently stolen from the police compound 2 days later.
Not from the police compound, no.
And Mr. Speaker,
Not from the
the
police
culprit involved in stealing the car initially had ankle bracelet. There's also the potential, Mr. Speaker, also the potential for increased import of flood damaged cars.
Members, honorable members.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the newspapers are filled with lists of homes for sale, presumably by families no longer able to meet their mortgage obligations. And we must recall that the Minister of Finance told us that the much ballyhooed PLP mortgage relief plan promoted during the election campaign assisted exactly 4 or 5 persons in saving their homes. He should be ashamed. He should be ashamed.
Member
Not to worry. Not to worry.
Speaking to third person.
His Minister of State has given us all assurances that they are busy trying to develop a new plan. A new plan. Maybe, if that comes about, a few more Bahamians will be helped. A few more will be helped. I found it interesting. I found it very interesting, Mr. Speaker, that the chairman for Arawak Homes, an ardent supporter of this government, was quoted in the news media lamenting the ill-advised tax policies being adopted in this budget. In particular, he lamented the inability of this government to move away from the troublesome addiction to tax waivers and exemptions by so many in our country, in our economy. You know, Mr. Speaker, we in the FNM began to wean local industry from the culture of exemptions and waivers that breed inefficiency and non-competitive production practices as far back as 1999. We settled on charging a low import duty of 10% on manufacturers that had been in operation for many, many years, some for as long as 30 years. Last year, this government reinstated the import tax exemption for such long manufacturers under the pretext that these companies could not survive the competition from imported goods without concessions. We had implemented a similar graduation from exemption program with BEC, imposing a 10% tax on fuel imports. Now, of course, this government is reversing that. But I will have much more to say about that later, not at this time.
Right here.
When last in office, Mr. Speaker, the FNM increased tax on luxury homes, most of which are purchased by wealthy international second home owners, to 12%. Last year, this government reduced that rate to 10%. We also granted one-time 5-year exemption from stamp tax to first-time homeowners for homes valued up to $500,000. This government, in this budget, has extended the exemption for yet another 5 years. This translates into the government giving up $50,000 in tax revenue for every first home purchased at a value of $500,000 for the next 5 years. In effect, a 5-year tax waiver becomes a 10-year waiver, and who knows what happens next. But this government did not see its way clear to grant the level of generosity of exemption to residents and investors in our remote family islands, or even to the owners of properties in the city of Nassau. The exemption from import duties under the Family Island Development Act and under the City of Nassau Rehabilitation Act has been extended for 1 year. Nor did the government, which claims to be the friend of the small man and the supporter of small businesses, see its way clear to extend the exemption from business license fees to small and medium-sized businesses, an exemption granted by the last F&M government. Mr. Speaker, economists believe that small and medium-sized businesses are often the biggest creators of jobs in an economy. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Instead of giving us facts and a clear idea of where he wants to take this country and his plan to stimulate the economy, the Prime Minister spent 3 pages of his communication, 3 pages of his communication talking about some half-baked plan to introduce Mardi Gras type festivities ahead of Lent. Now listen, if this crime continues as is, I can assure you, you will not see Mardi, and I certainly won't see Gras. Then the Prime Minister gave only one paragraph to the National Training Agency, which I believe is far more relevant, important, and critical to growing this economy. Yet, in this budget, the allocation for the National Training Agency has been cut from $477,946 to $150,000. That's a reduction of over $327,000. And they canceled the 52-week job skill training program. Lest we forget, another 10,000 students joined the labor pool since the election of this government in 2012.
The member stands on a point of order. The chair recognizes honorable member for Yamacraw. Members, member from Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Kalani is misleading this House and the Bahamian people. He speaks about a 52-week program, and he indicates that this government has canceled that program. The fact of the matter is the program expired. It was always set to be 52 weeks, and at the end of the 52 weeks, it expired. So it can be 52 weeks and then cancel at the same time. So, you know, the member is being very disingenuous in his presentation.
Thank you, honorable member. Member for Kalani, you may continue.
This government cannot be serious about training our people to meet the needs of our economy or to give further impetus to the economy through the expansion of skills and the creation of more efficiency. Mr. Speaker, in this communication, the government proudly exclaims, I quote, "We are also strengthening the foundations of the economy to secure steady growth and private sector creation, employment creation," end quote. And then it moved ahead with plans to increase its tax revenue in just 2 years by $450 million, or 30%. Oblivious to the negative impact this volume of tax revenue increase could have on job creation. While proposing an increase of tax revenue of this magnitude, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance advised that he anticipates a nominal increase in the economy over the same period of 8% and expects only a 5% increase in government spending over the same 2-year period. He really not serious. He couldn't be serious. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, as leader of the opposition in 2011, maintained that when the government, I quote, when the government increased tax, they drove the economy further into recession, penalizing in a tangible way Bahamian entrepreneurs and the ordinary working Bahamian, end quote. This budget, Mr. Speaker, increases tax by more than $100 million. And we must be mindful that the Minister of Finance told us in his budget communication that his tax program is not finished yet. More to come. That he will be coming back. He will be coming back as a taxman for an additional $70 million. One gets a sense that the government expects that these huge revenue increases are coming from somewhere outside the country. They are not coming from growth of the economy. The economy remains relatively flat. They are not coming from domestic banks, although the banks may complain about their new taxes, but the additional taxes from the banks are not considerable. It would be great, Mr. Speaker, if these taxes were on the external foreign sector while still permitting the country to remain competitive in that sector. But that's not where they come from. The reality is that they come from the ultimate source of revenue in this consumer-oriented society. These increases will ultimately come from our ordinary citizens as the final provider. We will pay. It is without doubt that the business of securing this economy, as the government is proposing, rests heavily on industry as key agents of economic performance. And yet, the signal going out from this government through this budget seems unusually adversarial toward industry, and it has nothing to do with taxes.
Member rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you. The honourable member from Killarney is misleading this House. There has never been a government that has been more supportive of industry than the PLP government. And I would ask the Minister of Killarney to withdraw those statements. Shortly after coming to office, no, I'm going to state fact. Shortly after coming to office, we reversed the decision under the Industries Encouragement Act that caused for Bahamians to be dismissed. And we took away the 10% duty and caused it to be duty-free. I tabled in this House letters from industry on how this government caused them to grow as a result of our policies. Mr. Speaker, secondly, during the midterm budget debate, we lowered the excise tax on trucks that are used for the expansion of business, policies for the support of industry. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, thirdly, we heard about the reduction in BEC bills and the tangible effect from the Member of Parliament from Tall Pines of what it will have on industry, the savings that those companies will incur as a result of the specific decrease in BEC bills. So the honourable member from Killarney is misleading the House. There's never been a government more supportive of industry than this PLP government, and I ask him to withdraw those statements.
Member for Elizabeth, the chair doesn't agree that it is necessary for the member to withdraw the statement. You stated your opinion and that it was clear and cogent, and the members heard it. So the chair will just ask the member to continue. Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the case of foreign-owned domestic banks, Perhaps it would be better if the taxes were levied on a way that did not necessarily increase their overall tax burden, such that local taxes were deductible from taxes paid to their home countries, but that they and all domestic banks should pay more taxes in this country is beyond political debate. Whether this is now the right level, perhaps time will tell. It is not beyond debate, however, that to charge the banks with a governmental responsibility of collecting commercial real property tax that government seemed unable to do is wrong on more than one level. No one should have a greater capacity, authority, or competence than the government in collecting government revenue. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the involvement of a third party in this exercise will undoubtedly introduce external costs, and the government may not have anticipated. There will be an economic consequence which may act as an inhibitor on credit for some. For others, it may reflect itself as an increase in the cost of credit. But it will not be the free ride that the government may be anticipating. Mr. Speaker, this is one measure the government may do well to reconsider. Mr. Speaker, the special adversarial stance toward industry comes most pointedly from the member for Fox Hill, whose responsibilities the Prime Minister appears to have expanded to include aspects of economic policy one would normally expect to find in the Ministry of Finance. If he had not so expanded the responsibility of foreign affairs, he remained curiously silent when those responsibilities were being usurped. In any event, the member for Fox Hill has not only warned industry to get behind his program, he has asserted that he will use the Department of Immigration to fix the economy. One does not need a great imagination to know what the member mean. Clearly, Mr. Speaker, this government has learned no lesson from the last time immigration was so blatantly used to fix our economy, when it seemed to some that there was greater opportunity for local employment in the offshore financial sector than we were realizing. The economy was fixed and remained fixed for quite some time, while our competitor offshore financial jurisdictions silently thanked us for moving their development along. It is usually more effective to remain silent if one feels he has a big stick. The use of threats is both silly and counterproductive in a free society. Mr. Speaker, instead of giving us the flowery talk of which he is known, the Prime Minister...
Member for Elizabeth, I'm curious as to your point of order.
Either it's intentional or not, but I think the member for Killarney is misleading the House. The member for Killarney speaks about local employment within the financial services sector, and then goes on to say that the Minister of Foreign Affairs is wielding a big stick. And if it's his intent to connect those two statements, I think he's misleading the House and the country. In fact, there is an agreement in principle by the Minister of Foreign Affairs with responsibility for immigration and his department and the Ministry of Financial Services, where there will be an operation with trained officers and a policy in place to expedite immigration matters in financial services. Actually, a landmark decision, policy decision by the minister that is going to help facilitate the industry rather than penalize the industry, and it's actually going to help it grow and cause for new training initiatives to occur. So if the member is trying to link wielding a big stick with the financial services industry, he is misleading the House and misleading the country, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Killarney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Instead of giving us the flowery talk of which he is known,
Member,
Prime Minister and Minister of
continue
Finance,
to speak to the chair and
the
refrain
Prime
from
Minister and
personal
Minister of
attack.
Finance needs to outline for us the pro-growth policies embedded in this budget. How does the government propose to grow this economy? What are the implications of its new economic policies of increased taxes now and increased taxes later? Grant exemptions to the wealthy now and tax the poor now and tax the poor later. We can find no discernible plan in the budget to support job-creating growth. Is the government seeking to stall the economic recovery? Or is it that they were wrong in the criticism of F&M policies in 2011-2012? They must not be permitted to have it both ways, Mr. Speaker. Regarding the balance of payments, the Minister of Finance noted in his communication that capital inflows were moderately stable in 2012. But he neglected to say that the contraction of about 75 million in external reserve would have been substantially greater had it not been for the foreign borrowing he began to engage in during 2012. This should be a concerning issue for him because it occurred concurrently with the largest foreign investment undertaking ever to take place in this country. To explain this balance of payments weaknesses by increased import pressure is not satisfactory, because most of the import pressure should have been foreign investment driven and hence of a neutral effect at worst. This either points to a worsening of the traditional deficit on the current account, which even huge foreign investment projects are no longer able to balance, or to the fact that the style of some foreign investment projects may be less foreign exchange efficient than we are accustomed to. If the latter, there may be nothing to consider except to understand the phenomena and put foreign direct investment in clearer perspective. If on the other, there is some fundamental deterioration in the current account of the balance of payments that allows of a fiscal policy solution, then that is an entirely different matter, which fiscal policy should clearly take note of. There is something enormously inconsistent about this budget, which I am prepared to allow the passage of time to clarify, Mr. Speaker. It cannot be that the identified level of new expenditure, as this government has randomly put forward, can be accommodated in the context of only a very marginal increase in overall expenditure without any identified specific cost reductions. It does allow the data to support the narrative that the narrative does not support the data, and time will bear this out. I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker.
Members.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. We have taken note that this budget provides $20 million under multiple budget heads for contract workers. The Minister of Finance, who as leader of the opposition in 2011 cautioned the F&M not to use its jobs and skills training initiative to help political supporters to the exclusion of opposition supporters, claimed that his party had been calling for these training and job creation initiatives since 2007. He reminded the F&M in 2011 that in the 5 years since the election of the F&M in 2007, some 25,000 students would have joined the labor force. Like the Prime Minister did in 2011, we want to encourage our supporters, indeed all Bahamians, to apply for these jobs. There must be no discrimination against FNMs or any others who do not support the governing party. These minimum wage jobs will be funded by Bahamian taxpayers, FNMs, PLPs, and others. This budget, Mr. Speaker, indicates that the government has entered upon a new rental spree. I ask the government, provide a list of all government accommodations so that we may understand why the government's allocation for rental accommodation
Member for Kalani,
has increased.
The member for Carmichael rises. Kindly yield.
Thank you very much.
Member for Carmichael.
And I thank you kindly for yielding, Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, you know, we always want to inform public opinion with accurate information. And I just want the public to know, inconsistent with what has just been said, we have these jobs programs that are going out. And if the opposition would be fair and honest, we also distribute those forms and access to them also. I mean, they get a package. They get a package. We make sure that every person that comes in has a fair chance. And so the idea that you're cherry picking jobs from different people is absolutely wrong.
Members.
Absolutely wrong.
Very well.
Yeah, and so we want young people. We want young people.
Members.
We want young people in particular.
I want to hear the member for Carmichael, please.
That what we are doing is equal opportunity and equal access.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for Kalani.
I'd like some myself. Which opposition do you refer to?
Member recognized. The chair recognized member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, again, in his the member is talking about a rental spree. And the member is quite aware, or ought to be quite aware, as he served in cabinet and in government for the last 5 years, that there is a critical problem with accommodations for various government offices. And so it is I cannot understand any member of parliament or any leader of an opposition who would wish for government employees to exist and to work under terrible conditions. And so if the government seeks to find accommodations for all these various offices that require them, that need them, some of the conditions under which our people are working, Mr. Speaker, is totally unacceptable. And so I don't understand any opposition leader or any member of parliament who would certainly want that to continue.
Thank you, honourable member. The point made. Member for Central Grand Bahama, you have an intervention.
Thank you so much, Speaker. The Speaker, the member for Carmichael mentioned that members of Parliament will send out packages relative to a program. I want him to be informed that I did not receive such a package.
Very well. That'll be dealt with. It'll be dealt with in the usual fashion. Members, the chair would recognize the member for Kalani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the opposition and no right-thinking Bahamian would want Bahamians or anyone to sit and work in inferior environments. We would never support such a move. We would want to ensure that the Bahamians get the best of what is provided and ensure that they maintain proper quality. Why the government's allocation for rental accommodation has increased by $10.4 million. I heard the comment by member for Yamacraw that rental for agencies are being consolidated and transferred out of ministry and department heads. Notwithstanding, I want the list, dates, and rental payment terms. I note, Mr. Speaker, that the amount for payment for rent at NIB has decreased by $4.5 million, notwithstanding that NIB have completed the state-of-the-art administration complexes that are being rented by the government to house multiple government offices in Central Abaco and in Freeport, Grand Bahama. Will the minister advise whether the government has entered into a contract to rent the new building constructed on JFK Boulevard opposite PTC, and if so, identify the owner of that building and the cost to be incurred? Mr. Speaker, a number of questions are being put to the Minister of Finance by my colleagues relating A number of questions have been put to the Minister of Finance by my colleagues relating to the other policy pronouncements by the government, for which no details have yet been produced. I repeat these questions to drive home the importance which we in the opposition attach to these matters. 1. Is the $5 million increase allocation in the budget to purchase or acquire an official residence of the Prime Minister or some other purposes? 2. The $15 million provided in the Ministry of Finance budget to facilitate the implementation of the priorities of Charter for Governance have disappeared from the budget this year. Her Majesty's loyal opposition requires a detailed accounting for this expenditure. We have heard harrowing stories about how work was assigned, scoped, contracted, executed, performed, and valued. Mr. Speaker, I want to say a little about trade. The Member for Parliament for Elizabeth had much to say about trade in his budget communication, especially our trade services offered to the WTO. For now, I simply say that the member was wrong. Wrong on the facts and on the politics. In short order, we will deal with this misinformation in a
Member for the chair is not going to allow it. Member for Kalani, as you gyrate towards me and speak to the chair, please.
Mr. Speaker.
Well, I'll entertain. Member for Kalani, pause for a second. Just
no,
Member for Elizabeth, you're making a point.
No, I have objection that he can say that I was wrong and not back it up with facts and say he will hear about it in the future. If I am wrong, say I am wrong now. Otherwise, withdraw it.
No, it's not necessary, Member for Kalani. You treat it as a rhetorical question.
No, it was an accusation.
It's a general accusation. It's a matter of opinion. I wouldn't take offense to that. Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the 38th Vice President of the United States, Mr. Hubert Humphrey, once said, "The moral test of any government is how it treats those who are in the dawn of life, its children. Those who are in the shadow of life, its sick. A government that would not provide hope and meet the needs of the sick is a government without compassion and represents a nation without soul." The Free National Movement government developed a comprehensive plan for health care in this Bahamas. We were building the health bridge to the future, ensuring that there would be no difference access to or in quality of health care delivered to Bahamians from Bimini north as far as Inagua in the south. We wanted to ensure that there was equality of health care for all, each and every Bahamian. Mr. Speaker, I was privileged to serve in a government and indeed to be a part of an amazing history of compassionate care for the sick and those in the dawn of life. To see my government make the single largest investment in healthcare infrastructure this country has ever experienced. The Bahamian people can now see the construction of the new state-of-the-art 70,000 square foot critical care block. Started under this FNM government in November 2011. And the construction of the mini hospitals or community hospitals in Abaco and Exuma, which the Minister of Health himself spoke so highly about during his contribution. This significant investment came about as a result of the following three-pronged plan left in place by my government. 1. Infrastructural improvement and expansion of healthcare facilities throughout the Bahamas. 2. Skills upgrading through an extensive program and professional training for Bahamian healthcare professionals locally and abroad, and by way of specific programs for nurses in critical care here at home and accredited by the Royal College of Nursing in the United Kingdom. A first, not only for the Bahamas, but for the Caribbean as a whole. 3, the development of a strategic plan for harnessing and maximizing the country's healthcare resources to enhance its delivery and quality, thereby making it sound second to none in the region. Always a priority, second to none. But, Mr. Speaker, the increased capacity and improvement in the physical infrastructure cannot achieve the planned objectives for improving the quality of health care and the quality of life for the Bahamian people unless it is commensurate with the necessary increase in human capacity. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the level of service to be provided in the critical care block at Princess Margaret Hospital is the most expensive, technologically and resource-intensive area of healthcare, and is considered to account for more than 20% of the overall operational expenses of the hospital. And these services have been under-resourced over the years due to the increase in trauma and severe shortages of specialist nurses and trained support staff. That is why, Mr. Speaker, that is why the FNM government gave priority to Public Health Authority by allocating almost 200 persons from the 52-week job program, with more than 70 of those persons to be trained as anesthetic assistants, surgical techs, patient care assistants, emergency medical technicians, and other support personnel, so as to ensure that there is a ready pool of trained support staff to meet the increased demand in service capacity at these health institutions. Those successful in the health component of the 52-week jobs and skills training program were amongst the best qualified persons engaged in the program, some being graduates of 2- and 4-year college programs. Mr. Speaker, this new category of healthcare personnel is a strategy now being used around the world, to expand critical healthcare manpower capacity and to relieve specialist nurses in particular from duties that are better suited for trained technicians, thus allowing highly trained specialists in ICU, operating theater, and NICU to give greater attention to patients who, because of the acuity of their case, are required to have one nurse per one patient. Inexplicably, When this government discounted the 52-week program, all of these trained professionals were left unemployed, and the medical facilities were left short-staffed. I can only imagine the sense of disappointment among those young people who were not only trained but certified as technicians and looking forward to promising careers in the public hospital authority healthcare system when they learned that they were no longer needed. But, Mr. Speaker, of greater concern to Bahamian people must be the lack of vision on part of this government that chose not to engage trained Bahamian technicians to provide services required in our health system.
Member for Kalani, we'll reserve your time. Member for Michael rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes honorable member for Michael.
Ordinarily, I wouldn't interrupt, but the member spoke to the 52 weeks program having affected a number of employees who worked in the healthcare system, and spoke to it as if their services were terminated, and spoke to their disappointment having not been kept on, as it were. I'm using my interpretation. It is misleading, Mr. Speaker, because when the 52 weeks program was instituted, it was always known and accepted by those who were employed that that program was only for 52 weeks. So they cannot say that they were surprised that the program ended and they had no more employment. That is disingenuous. And I think he just needs to be sure to speak the truth. The program came to an end, so was the employment. There's nobody on this side who brought that to an end. It was designed for 52 weeks. And everybody, as much as I know, and as much as this government knows, worked for 52 weeks. Now, if he has names of anybody who worked shorter than 52 weeks, bring them to us and we will fix it.
Very well. Thank you, honorable member.
Much obliged.
Member for Kalani, I think that's a fair assessment of the matter, and I just ask you to continue to govern yourself accordingly.
Thank you very much.
With that approach.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second.
The member.
You're going to have your time. 1 second. 1 second.
No, members. If you want to make an intervention, just rise and address the chair. The chair is conducting this business. So the chair doesn't need help from any of you sitting from your seats. The chair recognizes honorable member for North Andros and the Berries.
Thank you, Mr.
On a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was refraining from commenting on the former minister's speech as he presented here this morning. And but I was complimentary, as you said, to the construction of the critical care block as enunciated by your party. And it is indeed a very nice unit. However, I refrained from being critical of it in public up until now, because it is a critical block. As you point out, the organization and all the thought that went into this critical care block, what surprised me most and what is disappointing in the critical care block is its size. You built a critical care block with 20 beds, right? We had, from the history of, from Princess Margaret Hospital was built, we had 12 critical care beds. The population doubled over the 35 years of the Princess Margaret Hospital. The crime that you point to, the point I'm making, Kilani, is the unit is too small for the size country we have today. And if you had done the homework properly, you would have come up with a different formula.
Very well.
And so don't come here bragging about what you do, because what you have built is inadequate for the population of the size today and the demographics that's going.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
I'm not,
your point
not finished yet. With respect to the 52-week workers, I would like you to tell me who trained them, where did they work, and so on, because they were just assigned in the institution. And I don't know of any evidence to say they are certified as a phlebotomist or certified as an EKG technician. So, I mean, there's been no formal training. So anybody who has a little bit of training will have an opportunity when we start to recruit again to apply. But the 52-week program came to an end, and it came to an end.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Thank you, Honourable Members. Member for Kalani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Members. The Chair recognizes Honourable Member for Kalani.
I was not about to get into an argument with the member for Michael. Don't argue medicine. I won't argue law. But I'm glad the Minister of Health entered. First of all,
Member for Kalani, just address the Chair, and then that'll allow you much assistance.
To answer the Minister
the Chair is here
of
to
Health,
assist you.
To answer the Minister of Health, I think the Minister of Health must understand that when I was in office, Mr. Speaker, we did disease pattern studies within the country. We also did utilization review surveys, which meant that looking at the disease pattern and the utilization review, you would know what numbers of beds are needed for the utilization of the institution. That was also done with the community hospitals in Abaco, when they would have had initially up to 8-9 beds. The utilization review showed that you only needed 4, which would take you up to 2025. 8 beds would not be utilized before 2050. That's what utilization, and I urge that the member review his files so he would know what utilization review studies and surveys mean. Now I may proceed. Mr. Speaker, I was also concerned not to find budgetary provisions in this budget to engage specialized nurses from whom the last government had planned to engage for the new state-of-the-art critical care block that the Minister of Health and Member of Parliament for North Andros spoke so eloquently about. Without required staff, Mr. Speaker, our new critical care unit stands a good chance of becoming a yellow, God forbid, yellow elephant. I mean, it's not red, yellow. A yellow elephant once completed this year. Mr. Speaker, all these new facilities required for the successful introduction of the promised National Health Insurance Scheme, which government now acknowledges must be introduced in phases. We said that long time, phases, not the comprehensive that you were trying to push down the people's throat.
They, Honourable Member, they, not you, they. Use the third person, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The facilities without competent, trained, and certified staff will be useless to the National Health Plan of the Bahamas. And so, Mr. Speaker, I ask the government to advise how it proposes to staff the new health facilities as they come on stream. Where are the budgetary provisions to permit the engagement of the trained technicians and specialist nurses to whom I referred? Mr. Speaker, a number of additional matters continue to concern members of Her Majesty's loyal opposition with regard to the attention or lack thereof given by this government to the health care needs of residents on our family islands. I am advised, Mr. Speaker, that today there are no medical doctors available in Cat Island, San Salvador, Camps Bay, Andros, Spanish Wells.
The member rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes honourable member for Carmichael.
I'm a stickler for accurate information, man. I was just in Cat Island last weekend, and there is a doctor in Cat Island. Some of these other islands, they have people who are rotating through. So please, I don't know where you got the advice from, but the advice is wrong. I was just there 10 days ago.
Thank you, honourable member. The member for Carmichael indicates that there's a doctor in Cat Island.
Allow me to continue.
Member for Kalani, the member says that there's a doctor in Cat Island.
Doctor visits. Doctor visits.
So
he spoke about visits.
Time when you was there.
He spoke about visits. Spanish Wells, Governors Harvey Lutra, or Steventon Exuma. When does the government expect to appoint medical officers to fill these vacant posts? Has funding provision been included in this budget for these purposes? Mr. Speaker, the F&M government had plans to decentralize ambulance services so that an ambulance could be dispatched from Elizabeth Estate Clinic in the east, South Beach Clinic in the south, and Flamingo Gardens Clinic in the west. This would have considerably improved the response time to emergency calls and provided better island-wide coverage. I cannot find provisions in this budget to facilitate the addition of ambulance facilities at the various community health clinics in New Providence. It is a priority of this government to improve response time to emergencies and hence improve patient outcare. I note, Mr. Speaker, that the necessary EMS technicians required to provide these services were also trained through the 52-week jobs training program. Will the government engage these qualified and certified young Bahamians to fill the required posts? Mr. Speaker, as I conclude my contribution to this budget debate, I wish to record that one of the few positives that has happened in this nation over the last 12 months on the economic front has been that the unemployment in New Providence has decreased from 17% to 15%. What is curious is that after blaming the F&M for everything that they believe is wrong in our country, 1 year after being elected in office, this government is not embarrassed. They are not embarrassed to try and take credit for an improving unemployment situation evident only 6 months later. Mr. Speaker, any reduction in unemployment recorded over last year is to be credited to the F&M. As a new generation leader, my goal is to stimulate, liberate,
members,
and unleash, and unleash the uplifting entrepreneurial spirit within the productive mass of our people that would surge as a rising tide in uplifting our economy away from treacherous shoals and propel us forward, upward and onward, together as a nation, with a sustainable livelihood for each one of its citizens. Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, my last 9 minutes. The Family Islands, Mr. Speaker, and it's unfortunate that the Deputy Prime Minister is not here. I want to talk.
Speak of it. Speak of it. On your bed.
I would allow, as time is running, I would allow him to sit, and I would first talk about Kalani, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to first talk about Kalani, and allow the member to sit. Mr. Speaker,
he appears.
I have the constituency of Kalani has been supporting me, and I want to inform my constituents that we have already we have already within the Kalani constituency commence the installation of CCTV camera system within Kalani so as to monitor and try our best to minimize crime within our community. We would soon put signs within the given areas to inform the public that this area is under 24-hour camera surveillance. Mr. Speaker, this would help to resolve or minimize some of the criminal activities that we experience within our community, and at the same time, it would also assist in catching those individuals who drive through our communities and engage themselves in dumping and just environmental infringement within our community. I must say that our CCTV camera program, Mr. Speaker, is done in conjunction with the police. To answer your question. Mr. Speaker, moving forward, with the new $50,000 that would be given to each constituency, we have intention of expanding our program so as our community would be safe. And in addition to that, we would seek permission from the governing party, Ministry of Works, that the Gambia area, West Bay Street, where there are presently 2 parking lots, we would want to convert one of the parking lots into proper sitting area so that individuals, Bahamians, can have proper facilities to sell lunch products, to sell different paraphernalia, to sell human products, tourist products, no, not human, paraphernalia, paraphernalia and various different items, Mr. Speaker. That's craft. Mr. Speaker, I think what this would do is help to improve job opportunities and employment, and at the same time, tourists as well as residents would be able to sit within the comfort, overlooking the waterfront, have lunch, breakfast, whatever, served and sold by Bahamians. And within the community, we would install a CCTV camera that would be able to 24-hour survey and monitor the area, thus improving security. The Minister of Tourism, I'm sure, would be quite aware of the conch stall that's in the area that is visited by many tourists and many Bahamians. And in fact, in many instances to be served, it may take 1 to 2 hours to obtain conch salad. So we want to expand that. And with the other programs that you want to do, we would support that also. But these are the programs that we want to introduce to Kalani. Mr. Speaker, I want to state that while visiting in San Salvador, many tourists, as well as Bahamians, were complaining about the state of the roads in San Salvador. Mr. Speaker, it is regrettable. It's regrettable that residents must drive on these roads. Cars are being destroyed regularly, shock system, engines, etc. The tourists are also complaining. The tourists are also complaining and asking the question, how is it that a highly touristic destination would be exposed to this type of roads within the community? The other Mr. Speaker, the contract was already issued for the repair of these roads. Issued to a Bahamian. a Bahamian, who had made investment, already made investment
Members.
of equipments, etc., to proceed. One needs to be compassionate and look at it humanitarianly. When Bahamians, let me finish. Mr. Speaker, I also want to point out,
Members.
I also want to point out that the dock in San Salvador, there's difficulty with the vessel moving in sometime because of the tide and the depth of the water. And therefore, I asked the minister, when would the necessary dredging occur so that the vessels or the mail boat can move in and out quite readily? But also, Mr. Speaker, the individuals, Bahamians, goods and products are exposed to the element. As you can see, there are no facilities for packages, goods, frozen items, etc., to be placed. And these are matters that has to be addressed. But, Mr. Speaker, my last, just before closing, Mr. Speaker, there has been lots of concerns by Bahamians as to whether or not the information and statistics given. Let me finish. I only get 2 minutes. Whether or not the information, the statistics released by the police are correct. There's some concerns. Questions are being asked. And I had written a communication to the commissioner asking for some form of clarification. And I hope that I would get some form of clarification, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Members.
Kalani now rests its case.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The member for Cat Island Rumkey stands with an unusual frown.
Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Cat Island and Rumkey.
I just wanted to clarify and correct the member who just spoke. And I preface it by saying I never thought that he was part of the conspiracy I exposed in here very earlier. I know my classmate was a member from Central Grand Bahama. I know he was. Right? But you see, the former member for North Abaco, Hubert Alexander Ingram, right? He himself confessed, and I still have the tape, while standing on the ball court of Arthurstown and told the people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador that he never did anything for them and wasn't doing anything for them because they never elected his man. I had to remind my people that we did send one of his men with him once between 1997 and 2002. And he did nothing then either.
Zero.
Right? But he confessed this. I still have the tape.
Zero.
Right? The reason why the contract he talked about was issued but a week or 2 weeks before the elections, given to someone, a crony to a company that was called San Salvador Painting and Maintenance Company, to fix roads, to fix the road, right? It was signed by one of their cronies, their major general in San Salvador. And it was signed also by the candidate who's running against me. Right? And they still have not, and he signed as a witness to that agreement. The minister was there. Right now. The minister was there. Now, two things happened. See, and I posed the question, what interest did the candidate have in the contract? No. And I'm glad you're here and you could understand, because it was issued, Mr. Speaker, to a company Now, he had an interest. He either was an officer of that company, or he had an interest in the company, or the contract was invalidly executed. Now, you'll understand that. The member from St. Anne's will understand that. Clearly. You see, Mr. Speaker, and the leader of the opposition, I never held them accountable for that. Because when he sat, right where he was, I think, and I was explaining what happened to me during the course of the election, he was hanging his head down. He said, bring the evidence. Bring the evidence. Because he couldn't believe it. I did bring the evidence, you know. I brought it.
Exhibit number 1.
I brought I told him about the contract, and I brought all the employees who was on this same, what they call this 51-week program, 52-week program he's talking about. Yeah, 52, yeah. I brought all of them that he's hiring, how many they had hired. I also told them, and this was, they had another program called Jumpstart. On the day of the election, Mr. Speaker, they were giving out letters up to persons for 70, say, look, you're entitled to $7,500.
The letters went straight to the polls.
Right, to the polls, yes. I saw it myself. But he was washing his hands of it. But now I know. Now he brings it up. You're a part of it now.
That's right.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Leader of the opposition. So that's what you'll be engaging in. But as I said, Mr. Speaker, the theme roads, well, they just stay tuned. Right? And those same people who you were driving around with and taking pictures they told him that the bid had been opened for the contract. And who might have won the bid. You understand? He knows that. And he knows, too, that the contract can be signed very soon. They told him the road will be fixed. You can at least tell the public, as you're on your feet, showing your pictures, and you notice everyone in the picture wearing red. So it ain't nothing to do with fixing no roads, you know. It's all about politics. It's all about politics. But relief is there for the people of San Salvador. They know me. And we are not going to be deterred. We're not going to be deterred or distracted by the political shenanigans of those. Now, as I said, yeah. Huh? PD? But, you know, it's my classmate who was present when the candidate signed.
Yeah, we'll leave that there.
So I thought, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me just to speak today.
Very well.
Relief is on the side. And those same people that tell him that the contract is being signed, people will be mobilized very shortly, and their roads will be fixed.
A real road builder.
By a real road builder. No painter or maintenance man.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Not surprising, classmate stands. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the sake of posterity, for the sake of posterity, it was the intention that the Trust Agenda Infrastructure Crusade touch every island of the Bahamas.
They're afraid of those words. They're afraid of those words.
And Mr. Speaker, having touched islands represented by persons who I recently met, I thought it was only fitting that I ensured that my classmates' island was attended to. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, it is important to note that that contract was executed by the then Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Works and Transport. The documents will so indicate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Very well. Members, we will leave that right there. The chair, very well. The chair recognizes honourable member for Fox Hill for a point of order related to another matter.
This issue of whether a threat was issued by me with regard to the immigration policies espoused during the statement that I made here. I only want to say in response to it this way. The member for the Minister of Education, the member for Marathon, often reminds me that in a throwaway phase when I was speaking on the radio once, I indicated that with a new immigration minister, there was a new sheriff in town. You know, when we were boys and used to watch these westerns, when the new sheriff came to town, what he did was he spent time going around, putting up posters all around to say what the rules were for conduct from then going forward. So all that's happening now, sir, is that the rules are being promulgated as to how the business of immigration is conducted, and we expect people to conform with it. It's not a threat, they're just the rules. And the rules are not new rules either. They're simply being enforced. So, like my honorable friend says, there's a new sheriff in town.
Thank you, honourable member. As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Nassau Village.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today, it gives me great pleasure to rise in this chamber once again on behalf of the good people of the Nassau Village constituency. Mr. Speaker, this constituency includes the Seabreeze area, the Mount Tabor Estates area, Hope Gardens, Freeman Smith subdivision, and other areas off the Charles Sanders Highway and Soldier Road. Mr. Speaker, had it not been for my constituents who placed their faith and confidence in me, I would not be here today. Mr. Speaker, it feels like yesterday when I got the news that I had won my seat by more than 790 votes. And I remember my wife and I immediately locking hands with my team, and the tears of joy began to flow from my eyes when we prayed and gave God thanks for the great things He had just done. Today, I pause once again, Mr. Speaker, to give God thanks for He is continuing to do great things. To my constituents, I wish to express my sincere gratitude for electing me to this honorable house. I speak for you where I stand in this place today. I would also like to thank my Nassau Village branch for their continued support. And additionally, Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate all students who graduated from school this year, especially those that live in my constituency. Even though, Mr. Speaker, there are not many schools within my constituency, there are a cross-section of students that live there. To you, I say be encouraged and know that regardless of your financial circumstances or your social surrounding, you can be whatever you want to be. I say, look at me. My father, Duke Smith, came from Camp Road, and I grew up between Soldier Road and Yellow Elder. So, sir, I had my social and financial challenges, but I never gave up. And today, at the age of 37, I am a member of Parliament and the Deputy Speaker of this Honourable House of Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I decided, I said, since there were so many laughs going around a moment ago, maybe I'll crack a joke of my own. Mr. Speaker, sometimes while in the chair, I laugh to myself. When the right honourable member for Centerville walks in, I just sit back and chuckle and say, wow, I say, who would have thought that at the age of 37, you would hold an office where even the leader of the country had to bow to you? So students everywhere under the sound of my voice, I say be encouraged and know that one day you too can be the Deputy Speaker and have the leader bow before you, or you can one day be the leader of this great country. Yes. Before I begin my presentation, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say a belated Happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the Nassau Village constituency and in the Bahamas at large. I also would like to, by way of announcement, just indicate that we will be hosting a meet and greet for our fathers on the 22nd of June, which is this Saturday coming, at our community center on Soldier Road from 3 to 6. As I now begin my presentation, Mr. Speaker, before this honorable house today is the 2013-14 budget which we debate. And I wish to begin my contribution with the fact that while economic conditions are gradually improving, there is still much work needed to be done. However, Mr. Speaker, the improvements in our economy are indeed a direct result of the prudent handling of our nation's affairs by my government and the Right Honourable Member for Centerville, along with his Minister of State, the Member for Golden Isles. As the Right Honourable Member for Centerville stated in his communication, the economy grew by 1.8% in real terms last year, sir. The Right Honourable Member also stated that the economy had clearly turned the corner and we can anticipate steady, ongoing growth and employment creation in the period ahead. You know, I was so pleased to hear the Right Honourable Member state that this is the budget that secures the future for all Bahamians. You know, he further stated that valuable public resources will be used for hiring police and defense force officers, doctors, nurses, and for programs that will fight poverty and the like, instead of being used to pay principal and interest payments. This, I say, Mr. Speaker, is good news, and this is the news that the Nassau Village constituency needs to hear. Mr. Speaker, there were roughly 4,500 persons registered to vote in the Nassau Village constituency during the last election. Consequently, we believe we will need some 500 or more jobs to bring about economic stability in our community. You know, many constituents often say, Mr. Smith, if you can secure at least one job in a house where nobody is working, we will be on our way to economic stability. You know, I note here, Mr. Speaker, that job creation is a vital part of our plan. And moving forward, Mr. Speaker, the Nassau Village constituency will be looking forward to its fair share of the jobs. I reiterate this point to the member for Golden Gates. Member for Golden Gates, I hope you're listening. I said that the Nassau Village constituency will be looking forward to its fair share of the jobs come very soon when jobs are created. You know, but while speaking about the member for Golden Gates, I must stop here and commend that member for the fine job that he has been doing in his ministries. Yes. Mr. Speaker, while some of my constituents have found employment since my government took office, there are still some finding it very difficult to get a job. And those who are on jobs are trying their best to catch up on bills that have piled up while they were out of work. Many of my people, needless to say, Mr. Speaker, are still hurting. We desperately need more jobs and more assistance to help us get through this tough period. And I reiterate that when I speak for my people. And yes, though I understand brighter days are ahead.
Just pause for a second for me, Member for Nassau. Member for 12 Pines, just to remind you as you pass the bar to do the usual obeisance. And as the member for Nassau Village said, you don't bow to the chair, we both bow together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, I reiterate that when I speak for my people. And yes, though I understand brighter days are ahead, Mr. Speaker, my people are saying they need help and they need it now. This is a fact. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to providing more assistance for my community, as underemployment and unemployment is plaguing my constituency. Every day, Mr. Speaker, people are crying out for help. You know, the former administration has left the Bahamas, which includes my people, in a terrible condition. Though since my government took office, we are progressing. Mr. Speaker, this is a resilient party, and we are going to continue to push ahead until things get better. Now, Mr. Speaker, before I speak about urban renewal, I just would also like to commend the Member of Parliament for Rumkey, Cat Island, and St. Salvador for the good job that he has been doing in his ministry and with urban renewal. I would also like to thank my urban renewal team in Nassau Village, Mr. Speaker. This includes Inspector Douglas and his entire crew for being there for the youth and the elderly, especially at this time. No matter what anyone says, Mr. Speaker, we must give credit to the police officers and the volunteers who are keeping many positive programs going. You know, with their help, Mr. Speaker, we are becoming a community again. Now, Mr. Speaker, I wish to move on and talk about crime. And you could see, Mr. Speaker, that I am so pleased with the way in which this budget is presented and things that have happened so far that I am commending many members today. And before I speak about crime, Mr. Speaker, I just want to commend the member for Bain and Grantstown, as well as the Senator, Mr. Keith Bell, and the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Greenslade, for the fine job that they have been doing in helping to reduce crime, because this is no easy job, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, crime and the fear of crime has become a major concern, not just for the people of Nassau Village, not just for the people of the Nassau Village constituency, but the Bahamas as a whole. You know, I've been advised by many constituents of bold daylight robberies when money or jewelry like chains are taken. And as a result of these reports, I've asked the police to increase patrols, especially in the day. And I've also asked for more street lighting in my constituency. I know. That's the letter you got the other day from your pocket. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that the statistics indicate that crime is down today compared to last year at the same time. In the report prepared and released by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, we see declining numbers in crimes being committed. And I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that as long as we continue in all of our current efforts to rid this country of this scourge of crime, it will continue to decrease. Mr. Speaker, my constituency is one that has had more than its fair share of problems with the police. Crime and criminal activity, Mr. Speaker, are at unacceptable levels in this community. So, it is my hope, Mr. Speaker, with the interaction with the police through urban renewal and other positive programs that we intend to bring on stream soon, many young people will be rescued from a life of crime. You know, Mr. Speaker, most crimes that are committed today are carried out with unlicensed firearms. And I say we must do more to get these guns off the streets. We must stop the illegal entry of these weapons into our country. Far too many young people own these weapons, and they are using them to commit serious criminal acts. I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that swift justice will result in having those who commit such serious crimes quickly tried and off the streets and incarcerated where the rehabilitative process can begin. Mr. Speaker, as I talk about rehabilitation, we must place more focus on rehabilitation in this country, Mr. Speaker, because there are far too many re-offenders at Fox Hill. In addition, we need to look at ways to improve the conditions at the prison to promote a rehabilitative environment until a new prison can be built. You know, it is my opinion, Mr. Speaker, that if more persons are rehabilitated and not just punished, we will have less persons committing crime. Mr. Speaker, our society as a whole has to become a part of this crime solution. We can no longer point fingers at each other or make complaints. We must all get involved, Mr. Speaker, and do our part, because crime is hurting all of us. I've had a number of calls since being elected from constituents relative to violent crime. And you know, when I go into their homes, Mr. Speaker, when I go into the homes of these persons who are sometimes affected, you know, I see a picture of a young man riding a bike, growing up with loved ones, or sharing a laugh with family and friends, displaying a similar life to that you and I know, lives that most law-abiding citizens know. So I ask myself, where did this person make the turn? Where or when was it that this youthful, promising individual lost his or her way? I ask myself, Mr. Speaker, had I been directly involved in this person's life, could I have made a difference? But, Mr. Speaker, the truth of the matter is, there are people in their lives, just like me and you, that do nothing to reach down and save this drowning brother or sister. They do nothing to alert others of what is happening with this person who grew up in the Bahamas just like me and you. You know, right here, Mr. Speaker, I have to pause and remind my brothers and sisters of Proverbs 22, verse 6, which states, "Train up your child in the way that he shall go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." You know, additionally, Mr. Speaker, Proverbs 23, verse 13 and 14, which I think is so appropriate for what I am next about to say. You know, don't fail to correct your children. They won't die if you spank them. Physical discipline may well save them from death. And I ask persons to read that scripture and pay attention to what it actually means. We're not literally indicating that you have to spank somebody, but parents must start to discipline their children. Too many parents are allowing children to get away with too much. I often watch a commercial that come on at about 11:30, 12 a.m. at night and says, "Where are your children? Do you know where they are?" And I know so many parents can't answer that question. So I say, Mr. Speaker, that discipline can sometimes save them from death, as we know the increasing murder rate nowadays, Mr. Speaker. So today, I make a clarion call to my constituents and to the nation at large. Reach out to that brother, that sister, that friend, that cousin or that neighbor that is walking the wrong road and ask him to reconsider. Life is too precious, Mr. Speaker. It's too valuable. Life is a gift from God, and we must cherish this gift, Mr. Speaker. We must offer these persons a way back to their rightful place in society. You know, Mr. Speaker, I am touched by this issue because so many of these young individuals that are finding themselves either the victim of crime or the defendant of a crime, Mr. Speaker, are persons, like I say, that are similar in age to me. You know, persons that I feel that I should be able to reach out to and pull them back to this rightful place where they belong, Mr. Speaker. But after trying all that we can to save them, if we fail, we must be ready and have the courage to turn them into the law. And I say that sincerely, Mr. Speaker, because no man is above the law, and the public can now see that no matter who you are or where you sit, you cannot escape justice. In recent times, even police officers have been tried and convicted. Mr. Speaker, the public must feel that they can trust the police. They must also know that if the police find him or herself on the wrong side of the law, they too can and will be brought to justice. Mr. Speaker, all of us must be prepared to do the right thing should the situation present itself. If it be my brother, and I have 3 of them, so I hope they are listening. If it be my brother with the gun, I must be prepared to turn him in. I must feel safe speaking to the police if I report a crime. I should do so without fear or reprisal from those who I have reported. And even in this event, I must be confident that the police will protect me. Mr. Speaker, this is the type of thing that we must do. As indicated, as the good book said, Mr. Speaker, we must not have fear in correcting those that are doing wrong, because one day it may very well save their life. You know, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, my government in the next fiscal year will more than triple the size of the police force recruitment and training class to 100 officers from the usual complement of 30. We are, Mr. Speaker, on this side, investing in the police and the defense force because we believe that with the necessary tools and equipment, they will be in an even better position to win the war on crime. Mr. Speaker, additionally in this budget, the allocation of some $2 million for the acquisition of new police vehicles in the coming fiscal year. And while on the issue of resources, I would also ask the government to consider cars with dashboard cameras, dogs that sniff for guns and ammunition rather than just drugs, silent helicopters with surveillance capability, Mr. Speaker, or even remote-control drones to assist with the intel while fighting crime. You know, additionally, Mr. Speaker, we should consider a strike system for repeat offenders. Also, Mr. Speaker, I encourage the government to consider what they do in England with their CCTV. You know, they show criminals caught by CCTV, but of course with their identity hidden, on the news to warn would-be criminals that they are being watched even when they least expect it. Ms. Ford. Yeah. Save and except for crimes of passion, Mr. Speaker, it is my opinion that most persons commit crime because they feel confident that they will not be caught. I would therefore like for us to remove this false belief from the minds of would-be criminals. Let us send a clear message that no matter who you are or where you commit a crime, you will be caught, swiftly prosecuted, and if convicted, sentenced accordingly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the water came. Sorry.
The member yields. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bain and Grandstown.
Mr. Speaker, it's now 1 o'clock. I would like to move the suspension till 3 p.m. this afternoon.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House will suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
This morning session and what ought to be the morning session for the final day of debate here on the 2013-2014 budget. The member for Nassau Village, Deputy Speaker Dion Smith, with his presentation. We expect that he will conclude at 3 o'clock. We still have the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, Minister of Tourism Obi Wilscombe, the member for Baines and Grandstown, Leader of Government Business, Dr. B.J. Nottage, and of course the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, Philip Davis. All of them to present, as well as the Prime Minister to wrap it up. So we probably go very late tonight. Of course, this morning we heard from the member for Kalani, Dr. Hubert Minnis, Leader of the Opposition, again defending his government's, the F&M government's tenure over the last 5 years, saying that they left the economy in a wheelchair, but it has since been put to bed. And so we will hear some more about that in later newscasts, but we'll be back here with you at 3 o'clock this afternoon for the continuation of this debate on the 2013-2014 national budget. I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.